Okay, today class is air pollution. So topic is air pollution. So what is the air pollution? First of all, right? So the contamination of the atmosphere by toxic pollutants present at concentrations above their natural levels, which pose adverse effects on living things and also the ecosystem in general. So when the air gets polluted by various factors as gases and also chemical into the atmosphere. So that is called air pollution, right? So most of the Earth's are our atmosphere, it is a very suitable mixture of oxygen and nitrogen, right? Oxygen and nitrogen. So in addition, there are some other gases also. So and aerosols also, vapor varying in content and concentrations, right? So the air is made up of many different components currently. So 78% of nitrogen and 20% of oxygen, and water vapor is 1%. So that is right. 78% of nitrogen, right? Nitrogen, and 20% of oxygen, and also water vapor is 1%, right? Water vapor is 1%, and also other inert gases, mainly argon. So that is 0.97%, and also carbon dioxide and other gases. So that is 0.3%, right? So the air is made up of these many different components, right? So this is the percentage of the components. And what is the air pollutants, right? Sorry, what are the air pollutants? You see here. So the substances that are responsible for air pollution are known as air pollutants, right? So nobody cannot come to my class. Just 1 second. Right. So the substances that are responsible for air pollutions, those are known as air pollutants, right? So it can occur in solids and liquids and also gases, and also from natural as well as human sources, right? So these are the air pollutants, right? So you see here, so based on air pollutants, it can be classified into two categories. How many? Two categories, right? So first one is primary pollutants and second one is secondary pollutants, right? So we'll discuss one by one. First one is primary pollutants, right? So primary pollutant is an air pollutant emitted from a source directly into the atmosphere. So those pollutants that emitted directly from the sources. So it is directly into the atmosphere. So that is called primary pollutants, right? So then you see here. So examples of the primary pollutants. So those are, first one is sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxide, carbon monoxide, hydrocarbon, and volatile organic compounds, and particulate matter, and also lastly lead, right? So these are the primary pollutants, right? So the next one is secondary pollutants. So secondary pollutants formed into the atmosphere as a result of chemical or physical interaction between the primary pollutants and other atmospheric compounds, right? So, right. So this is not directly emitted, right? So, but they forms in the air. So when primary pollutants react or mix with them, right? So we see for examples of secondary pollutants. Sorry. So sulfuric acid, sulfur trioxide, and nitric acid, carbon dioxide, ozone, and hydrogen peroxide, and peroxyacetyl nitrates. So these are the secondary pollutants examples, right? So next we are going to sources. So what are the sources of air pollution, right? So you see here. So the air pollution, it can be classified based on the type of activity, their frequency of occurrence, and spatial distribution, and the types of emissions, and the types of sources, and also it can be delineated as rising from natural and man-made sources, right? So that is based on sources pollution. That is, first one is natural sources and man-made sources, right? So what are the natural sources? You see here, air pollution can be divided into man-made and natural. So natural sources. So these are caused by the natural reasons such as volcanic eruption in forest fire or wildfire, right? So this is the natural. So natural forest fire and volcanic eruptions include smoke, ash, and also forest fire and other suspended particles into the atmosphere or into the air, right? And next, man-made, right? Man-made sources. So these are caused due to the human actions, right? Such as industrial, traffic, and also domestic, right? So industrial in different types of industries like petroleum, textiles, chemical, and also power plants, right? And traffic, it means ships, buses, cars, trucks, planes, etc. And domestic means either insecticides and also some municipal sewage, right? So these are the examples of the man-made pollution. So burning of fossil fuels, uh, vehicle emissions, and industrial emissions, power plants, construction activities, military training activities. So these are the some of the man-made sources, right? So based on mobility, right? You see here based on sources. So that is natural and man-made, right? You see here based on mobility. So based on mobility, air pollution sources are two types. So that is stationary source and mobile source, right? So you see, first of all, first one, stationary source, right? So stationary source is divided again into two types. First one is line source and second one is area source. Sorry. Sorry. Point source and area source. So point source means sources are stationary and very large in nature, right? So that is examples, those are industries and also power plants, right? And second one is area source. So these sources are stationary and those are small areas with differentiate, identify directions, right? And second one is mobile source, right? So mobile source are divided into two types. First one is line and area source. So line source. So these sources are mobile in nature along with long linear routes, right? So for example, traffic of highways and railways and air traffic, right? So then next we are going to area source. So area sources. So these sources are mobile but concentrated over some specific areas, right? So for example, you see here airports, railway stations, bus stands, and also some of the ports, right? So these are the examples of mobile source. And next we are going to man-made pollutants. So what are the man-made pollutants, right? You see here, this one, this man-made pollutants. So you see here, first one, industrial, traffic, domestic. So you see one by one here, industry. First one is industry. So industries are factories, right? So we have number of industries. So which are the potent sources of air pollution? So industrial processes such as petroleum refineries and metallurgical plants and smelters and chemical plants and sugar mills and also cotton mills and also some of the synthetic rubber mills, right? So these are the main sources of the air pollution. So they are produce a large amount of large amount of harmful gases such as what is the carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, particulate matter, right? So these are into the atmosphere, right? So pesticide and insecticides also, right? So that industries are posing a serious threat to the environment, right? So Bhopal gas tragedy. So that is a recent example in which methyl isocyanate, that is called MIC, right? MIC. So that gas leakage killed several thousands people in their sleep, right? So the next you see here, power plant, thermal power plants. So there are a number of thermal power stations and super thermal power stations in our countries. So all these thermal power plants burn uh, huge amount of coal to generate electricity. So the burning of coal produces several air pollutants. So the chief air pollutants are carbon monoxide, hydrocarbon, and also particulate matter and sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, right? So these are the pollutants example for the thermal power plant. And you see here automobiles, right? So the automobiles, that is the toxic vehicular exhaust. So those are biggest sources of air pollution in the some of the cities. So the vehicles are responsible for more than 80% of total air pollution in the surrounding city areas, right? So they stand next to only the thermal power plant as the sources of air pollution. So the sources of emissions in the automobiles, so those are exhaust system fuel tanks and carburetor carbon monoxide and oxides of nitrogen and also lead, right? So these are the examples. And planes, this here, ships, same. Next, we are going to insecticides, right? So, agriculture. So, it is very important. So, the agricultural practices like burning of fields, plowing of dry fields. So, those are used of pesticides produces lots of particulate matter, right? Particulate matter, that is smoke and pollutant gases. So the agricultural farmers spraying of insecticides, pesticides and fertilizers, etc. Right? So these gases these get mixed with the air and causes of the air pollution, right? And next we are going to natural pollution sources, right? So that is, first of all, ions of toxic gases that is released from the volcanic eruption and forest fires, right? And also particulate matter and dust and also pollens. So they naturally present into the atmosphere. So wildfire. So wildfire smoke is associated with a range of adverse health effects. That is due to the negative effect of poor air quality. So these adverse health effects that is include a heightened risk of developing breathing problems for individual with pre-existing respiratory problems. And also a greater likelihood of dying from COVID-19 and higher rates of heart attacks and also other cardiovascular problems, right? So you see here some of the forest fire figures, right? So next we are going to major gases pollutants, right? So first one is carbon monoxide. So this is very, very important. So it is produced chiefly through incomplete combustion, right? So incomplete combustion of fuel produces, what is that? Carbon monoxide, right? So some carbon monoxide is also produced by geophysical processes and biological processes like volcanic eruptions, natural gas emissions, electrical discharges, and marsh gases, and also seed germination. So carbon monoxide, so it is colorless and it is formed when the carbon and fuel does not burn completely. So the main source of carbon monoxide is what is that? Motor vehicle exhaust. And therefore carbon monoxide levels, those are very high in areas with heavy traffic, and also other sources include bushfires also, right? Bushfires. So the carbon monoxide contributes to the greenhouse effects and smog and also acidification. So the gas, it can bind to hemoglobin in our blood and preventing oxygen transport through the body. So this result in oxygen depletion of the heart, brains, and also blood vessels, and eventually causing, what is that? Death also, right? So this is the carbon monoxide. And next we are going to carbon dioxide, that is called CO2, right? So it is the principal greenhouse gas emitted as a result of human activities such as the burning of coal, oil, and natural gases, right? So this is the carbon dioxide. So next, sulfur dioxide, oxides of sulfur. So it is the most important and common air pollutant produced in huge amounts in the combustion of coal and other fuels in the industrial and domestic use, right? So you see oxides of sulfur, sulfur includes SO2 and SO3. So they are chiefly produced by combustion of fossil fuel in stationary sources. So the thermal power plants contribute a large share, right? So this is the important. This transportation and industrial processes. So these are also generate them. So they are corrosive in nature, right? So it is also produced during smelting of sulfide ores. Right? So sulfur dioxide concentration in air, it have decreased in the past 2 decades. So mainly because we use more non-sulfur containing fuels for the generation of energy, right? So the sulfur dioxide is a stringing gas and it has a result, it can cause breathing problems with the humans. So in moist environments, sulfur dioxide may be transferred to sulfuric acid, right? Sulfur dioxide transferred to sulfuric acid, right? So this acid causes acidification and winter smog, right? So the sulfur dioxide is a gas that can be produced when sulfur containing fuels. So those are burning during industrial processes like in power plants and refineries. So most of the sulfur dioxide emissions come from the which one? Power generation plants. So but very little comes from the mobile sources, right? Mobile sources. So this gas can cause eye and throat irritation and also harmful to lung tissue when we inhale, right? So this is the sulfur oxides and oxides of nitrogen. Next one. So nitrogen oxides. So that is NO3 and N2, right? So oxides of nitrogen, those are produced due to combustion. So, but a larger quantity is generated by natural processes. So, of the man-made activities producing oxides of nitrogen, those are the combustion, both from transportation as well as from stationary. Right? So using catalyzers in car exhaust, it can prevent emissions of nitrogen oxide. So these nitrogen oxides are gases that react with other air pollutants when they are present in the air. So for example, so nitrogen oxides plays an important role in the formation of, what is that? ozone, right? Ozone in the lower atmosphere and in acidification and eutrophication processes. So they can deeply penetrate the lungs and damage to the human lungs functions, right? So it is usually formed when fuel is burned at a high temperature. Common sources are the exhaust of motor vehicles and also industry, power plants, and gas stove tops also, right? So you see the sources, oxides of nitrogen also play a significant role in photochemical smog and ozone formation, right? I already told about this. Next, fluorides. So this is also important. Fluorides. So those are chief sources of fluoride pollutants are, what is that? Brickworks, aluminum factories, and glassworks, steelworks, ceramic factories, phosphate fertilizer plants, uranium smelters, and combustion of coal, right? So some fluorine pollution also occurs during combustion of coal, right? So most injurious fluoride pollutant is gaseous hydrogen fluoride, that is HF, right? That is called HF. So fluoride is released into the air or atmosphere in large quantities by aluminium, right? Aluminium reduction plants and also phosphate processors and steel mills and also coal burning operations and some of the bricks and tile factories and various less significant sources, right? So these are the some of the fluoride, right? Fluoride sources. And next, chlorine, that is Cl2. So chlorine concentration change very rapidly in the atmosphere due to atmospheric chemistry and light rain. It can remove all the chlorine from the air in a very short time. So chlorine, so all the chlorine concentrations change very rapidly in the atmosphere due to atmospheric chemistry and light rain can remove all the chlorine from the atmosphere, right? So chlorine injury can occur to plants near the sources of pollution. So the impact of chlorine pollution, that is increases in the bright sunlight and decreases in drought and low temperatures, right? So this is the chlorine and hydrocarbons, right? So hydrocarbons. So these are organic compounds, right? So with hydrogen and carbon, right? Hydrogen and carbon. So it's come from incomplete burning or evaporated from fuel supplies, right? Fuel supplies. So the major source is automobiles, but some from industries. So it contributes to smog. So smog is caused by the interaction occurring between nitrogen dioxide and various volatile organic compounds, right? So this is the hydrocarbons. Hydrocarbons an organic compound containing only hydrogen and carbon, right? So these are gaseous at room temperature. So those are designated as hydrocarbons. So in unpolluted areas, so the methane, that is CH4, so it is mostly abundant. So other hydrocarbons normally noticeable are petroleum products and gasoline, right? Next, lead. So lead is produced mostly as a result of metal and ore processing motor vehicle exhaust, used to be major source of lead pollution. So however, regulatory efforts to reduce lead and fuel has led to a massive reduction in lead emissions. So lead, it can cause nervous system damage, right? And also some of the digestive problems, and in some cases cause cancer also, right? So this is the lead sources. And ozone. So ozone, it is highly reactive gas composed of 3 oxygen atoms, right? So that is O3, O3. So that is not emitted directly to the air. So but it is formed as a result of sunlight acting on other chemicals in the air. So the ground level of ozone is a pollutant, whereas ozone that occurs naturally in the upper atmosphere has a protective function. So there are hundreds of other air pollutants, so that can be also led to adverse health effects, right? So ozone is a significant greenhouse gas, right? So and it is useful for life on the earth. So it prevents ultraviolet beams from going through. So on the ground, the ozone can cause a ton of medical problems for humans, right? What is that? Examples: breathing tissues, clogged throat infections, right? Etc. etc. So effect of air pollution on plants, and it is lead to loss of capacity for the plant cells. So this is thought to influence the procedure of the photosynthesis, right? Then next we are going to particulate matter. So what is the particulate matter? So all of you know about this ozone, lead, hydrocarbons, chloride, fluoride, right? So, but somebody don't know about this particulate matter. So particulate matter means some of the small particles, right? Small particles. So particulate matter is a complex mixture of small particles and liquid droplets. So that are mainly from the industry or motor vehicle exhaust, dust storms or bush fires. It can also generate large amount of particulate matter, right? So the particulate matter is classified according to the diameter of the particles. So the health effect of particulate matter, those are mostly due to particles. So that are less than 10 micrometers in diameter. So these particles can reach the deepest parts of the lungs, right? And enter the bloodstream, right? So dust and ash and soot, SOOT, not shoot, soot are cement, right? So these, if inhaled, right? So it may cause the respiratory problems like asthma and bronchitis, right? So these are the particulate matter sources. And VOC, that means volatile organic compounds, right? Volatile organic compounds. So volatile organic compounds, it can be a range of different contaminants such as carbohydrates and organic compounds and solvents, right? So these compounds usually derived from petrol and gasoline reservoirs, industrial processes and fuel combustion, paint and cleanser use are agricultural activities. So the volatile organic compounds play an important role in the ozone shaping in the lower atmospheric layer. So the main cause of that smog, 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 right? So that is the main cause. So the volatile organic compounds, it can cause various health effects. It is depending on the kinds of compounds that are present and their concentrations. And effects, it can vary from smell nuisance to decreases in the lung capacity and also even cancer also, right? So this is the volatile organic compounds. And so what is the time? 1:04. So okay. Okay, I will tell in the next class at 3 p.m. Okay. Now Vasanti, I think 12 to 1:30. Okay, no problem, no problem. I will take up to 1:30. Okay, wait. So air pollution effects, right? So what is the air pollution effects? So those are human health, material damage, and climate and aesthetic effects, right? So based on the preliminary regulations and standards, so it prescribed by the various statutory and regulating agencies. So the impacts of various activities on the air quality, it have to be examined. So air pollution affects to human health, material damage, and also climate and aesthetical effects. So first one is human health effects, right? So so several pollution effects. So our health and causes may fatal diseases and disorders, and also eye irritation and headaches, and also aggravation of respiratory difficulties, right? So these are the importance, right? So the pollen grains and spore produces allergic reaction and asthma and also bronchitis in several persons. And sulfur dioxide enters the soft tissue and it produces drying of mouth and scratchy throat and smarting eyes. And mining dust, right? Mining dust causes black lung diseases. And also lead causes anemia, headaches, loss of appetite, and damage of erythrocytes and central nervous system, right? So the air pollution has resulted in several respiratory disorders and also heart disease among humans, right? So how does air pollution affect human health? Anybody? Okay, right. So air pollution, it is an issue of major concern which has led to an extreme toxicological impact on the human health in the environment. And it is linked to millions of deaths every year, that is worldwide, not only India, that is worldwide. So since the beginning of industrialization in countries like India and also Iran, so it has seen a significant increase in air pollutants in the 1970s, right? 1970s. So, but then quickly speak to harmful levels. So, the motor vehicles and industrial processes majorly contribute to the air pollution, it is globally. So, the 6 major air pollutants have been named by the World Health Organization, that is WHO, namely nitrogen oxides, sulfur oxides, carbon monoxide, and also particulate pollution and ground level ozone also. So each of the above air pollutants, it has different effects on the human body while attacking specific body organs like sulfur oxide, that is poisoning, leads to headache, right? And also nausea, weakness, vomitings, and also other medical emergencies like hypoxia, and also some of these diseases, right? So these are may long-term and short-term health tissues, so that culminate into chronic diseases with little to no cure short-term. Ones like respiratory and cardiovascular diseases, eyes irritations, and also skin rashes, and also cancers like lung cancer. So skin cancer as well as a massive impact on the human nervous system like vascular hypertrophy, right? So this is the human health effects and plants and crops. So how do plants get affected by the air pollution, right? So plants and crops. So these are the at the forefront of air pollutants, right? So since the aerial surfaces of plants, particularly leaves, right? So leaves are in direct contact with the atmosphere and they absorb air pollutant that is very quickly, right? So the pollutants then induce oxidative stress, that is producing free radicals in reactive oxygen species, that is called ROS, right? So that cause damage at different levels. So what is that levels? Disruption of the cellular metabolism and degradation of chlorophyll and mineral deficiencies. So these are the some of the damage different levels. And ozone effect also photosynthesis in most plants, and it cause foliar lesions, right? So it can also enter the stomata, right? And it decay plant cells directly. So ozone may also cause stunted growth and in severe cases death. So brown patches on some of the you see in potato leaves, right? So it is an example of the moderate ozone damage, right? So acid rain and also some of the nitrogen oxide interfere with the nutrients available for the plants, right? So effects of air pollution on plants, it is one of the many disastrous impacts of air pollution on the plants. So when the harmful particles enter the air, leading to situation that actually leads to the effect on plants, that is due to air pollution. So plants and crop will be subjected to the undesirable consequences of the air pollution, including abnormal growth patterns and leaf discolorations. Right? So which plants are most affected by the air pollution? So plants take up a variety of atmospheric pollutants, right? So it includes both ozone and nitrogen oxides. So and heavy metals and smoke and also particulate matter. So the plants that are super sensitive to air pollutants, that is includes trees, you see trees, crops, shrubs, and leafy greens, right? So trees is here, you see here some of the trees and crops and shrubs and also leafy greens. So these are the most affected plants, right? And also animals. So animals also suffering from this air pollution, right? So such as the cattle, it will be subjected to undesirable consequences of the atmospheric pollution, right? So not only humans, right? So but animals too are affected by this air pollution levels, which can adversely affect their lungs or trigger asthma and also cause chronic obstructive pulmonary diseases. So the air pollution also increases risk of acute cardiovascular events and also some of the development of coronary artery disease in animals. So several cases of fauna that is being affected by the toxic pollution, it have been reported across various cities, veterinary hospitals, some of the hospitals, right? Veterinary hospitals. So air pollution levels which can adversely affect their lungs, trigger asthma and cause chronic obstructive pulmonary diseases, right? So which animals are most affected by this air pollution? You see here, birds. So birds are most affected by the noxious mix of pollutants, right? So birds are among the first to get affected by the noxious mix of pollutants. So birds have a more efficient respiratory system so than any other species. Hence, they are directly and indirectly affected by the air pollution. So they are spend more time in the open air, right? So exposing them to greater levels of toxic fumes that is coming from the vehicles and power plants and also some of the factories, right? So the air pollutants disturb bird communities, right? Bird communities. So boson and nitrogen oxides so cause direct and irreversible damage to birds' lungs, right? This is cause direct. This is direct. So what is that? Irreversible damage to the bird's lungs. You see how much this? So long-term exposure, it can lead to lung failure and also poor immune system and reproductive success and population decline and more, right? So these are the some of the most affected animals. And also material damage. So how material damage to this air pollution? So material damage, it means property damage or property devaluation because of odors, deterioration of material such as concrete and discoloration of painted surfaces on the vehicles, buildings and bridges structures, right? So these are the some of the material damage sources. And next, vegetation damage. So the vegetation damage. So the effect of air pollution on vegetation, it is a serious issues these present days, right? So the vegetation plays an important positive role in the atmospheric purification and air pollutant reduction, right? So, and climate change. So climate change is also important thing. So that is effects on climate changes include greenhouse gases and also ozone depletion, right? and aesthetic effects. So these effects include reduction in visibility and discoloration of air and photochemical smog. So these are related to traffic disruption at airports and the general nuisance aspects of odors and dust, right? So these are some of the sources of pollutions. And EIA on environment. So what is the EIA study on the environment? So that is to evaluate the impacts on air environment by any project activity. So we have 6 steps was proposed for planning and assessment of impact studies. So these are the 6 steps. So first one is evaluation and identification of sources and quality of air pollutant emissions of different phases of the proposed projects, such as construction and also operation and development, right? And second one is detailed evaluation of the project area for the existing ambient air quality and emission inventory, and also meteorological data and natural air quality existent in the project area. And third one is examination of appropriate laws, regulations, or criteria to be followed for maintaining ambient air quality. That means AQI, right? And pollutant emissions standards also. And fourth one is carrying out impact assessment studies and adopting mass balances in dispersion calculations, comprehensive mathematical models, and also qualitative predictions. So these are based on case studies and professional judgment. And fifth one is assessment of significance of anticipated beneficial and detrimental impacts. And sixth one is development of appropriate mitigation and remediation measures for the adverse impact. So these 6 steps present the relationship between activities in the proposed model, which can be used to plan the study on the air quality impacts. And also it is to develop the scope of the work for such a review air quality impact information, right? So this is the air environment. So you see here some of the air pollution sources of some activities. So in this, the first step, it has to examine what type of air pollutants, right? So those are to be emitted during the construction, right? Construction of the proposed project in their quantity. So if you observe in this table, the typical sources of some project activities is there, right? Here, these are the activities. An emission factor, it is the average rate at which a pollutant is released into the atmosphere as a result of some activities, like you see here, combustion activity and also industrial production. So these are divided by the level of that activity. So and also emission factors related to the types and qualities of pollutants emitted to the indicators. So which indicators are like production capacity, quality of the fuel burn, and vehicle traveled by an automobile. So these emission factors are for the different air pollution pollutant from the various types, such as refuse, incineration, and automobiles, etc., etc. So these are present in this some of the activity, right? Okay, so now class is over. I will take at 3 p.m. Okay, now Vasanthi madam will take the class.